Have you ever wondered why the Pentagon seems to be at the center of so many controversies, yet nobody talks about the real issues driving these debates? In today's video, we dive deep into the heart of America's military and political landscape, exposing truths that will leave you questioning what you've been told. From accusations of politicization to shocking revelations about retired generals violating military codes, this is a story of power, hypocrisy, and a fight to restore accountability. You need to watch this video until the end because it unravels critical issues affecting our nation's future. We'll explore why former secretaries and generals are accusing the administration of politicizing the Pentagon, while their actions, like General Thompson's secret calls to China or Leon Petta's election-time disinformation, reveal a double standard. You'll hear how the Pentagon's focus on DEI has led to depleted munitions and failed audits, compromising our security. We'll also break down David Trump's bold plan to cut $500 billion in waste, boost recruitment, and depoliticize the military with non-traditional leaders like Pete Hex and Kash Patel. This isn't just about politics. It's about your tax dollars, your safety, and the integrity of the institutions meant to protect us. By the end, you'll understand why these changes matter and how they could reshape America's future. Don't miss the explosive conclusion that ties it all together. Stay tuned to see what's really at stake. If you are not subscribed, subscribe and activate the notification bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support means a lot to me. And if you enjoyed this video, you can help me continue spreading the valuable lessons by liking and sharing it. If you like the topic of this video, please comment 1. If you don't, please comment 0 to let me know how I can improve and make better videos for you. Now, let's begin. Mark Thompson, at 67 years old, made some bold and controversial moves during his tenure. He once reached out directly to a Chinese counterpart within the People's Liberation Army, warning them that if he, Thompson, saw David Trump as erratic, he would first inform the communist Chinese general. This was a staggering move that defied typical protocol. As chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Thompson stepped outside the official chain of command, instructing theater commanders to report to him directly, bypassing the defense secretary, a role he had no right to interfere with. His overreach was nothing short of alarming. After retiring, Thompson didn't pull back from his outspoken nature. Instead, he publicly called an active president, running for re-election, a fascist. This behavior wasn't isolated. Numerous retired generals have followed suit, publicly labeling President Trump as a fascist, a Nazi-like figure, even comparing him to the architects of Auschwitz. They've called him a congenital liar, Mussolini-like, and worse. These actions, in violation of Article 88 of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, left the public questioning the credibility and integrity of those entrusted with our national security. But let's step back and consider the larger issue. The truth is, we don't need more letters from supposed experts. These experts are often nothing more than partisan voices, and their advice does little to move the needle in any meaningful way. But what stings is the hypocrisy we're seeing now, particularly from the left. Individuals who once claimed to represent the people but have detached themselves from the very public they purport to serve. It's almost comical how the elite have positioned themselves. They say, "We're here to help," but their actions tell a different story. They push for more money, which ends up in the hands of DEI bureaucrats instead of directly funding the vital work. They claim that research departments are making breakthroughs like curing cancer, but that argument is a smokescreen, a way to justify the waste of resources. It's exhausting, and frankly, we're tired of it. Take a page from Hillsdale College, for instance, which has operated without federal money for decades. They're better funded and more efficient, and they don't rely on the government's handouts. Hillsdale has stayed true to its principles, staying lean, mean, and financially independent, unlike so many other institutions that squander taxpayer dollars. When it comes to the federal budget, the options for cuts are not just a matter of reducing Social Security or Medicare, though that's often where the conversation goes. People are talking about cutting defense spending, but we know Trump isn't going to let that happen. Instead, he's focused on finding savings where he can, so that America can build the sophisticated weapons it needs to stay competitive. If he can slash $500 billion and still manage to generate revenue, whether from tariffs, deregulation, or a little boost from his gold card, it's a remarkable achievement. A savings of $700 billion? That's unheard of. The endgame here is to get to zero within 4 or 5 years. But don't be misled by projections. When the debt is raised to $5 trillion, it doesn't mean that it will reach that figure. It's just a safety net, an option. It's worth remembering that in the past half-century, we've only seen 4 balanced budgets: 1998, 1999, 2000, and 2001. Those budgets were a product of a deal between Bill Clinton and Nathan Greenwich. Clinton agreed to make spending cuts in exchange for a tax increase, which brought the national deficit under control. But let's put things into perspective. At that time, the annual deficit was a mere 0.3% of GDP, and the national debt was a manageable $5 trillion. Fast forward to today, and the numbers are staggering. $37 trillion in national debt, with $3 billion in interest per day. It's an entirely different world now. The challenge we face is much greater, and that's why Trump is being forced to confront the reality of the debt increasing by $7 trillion. One thing everyone should do is take a moment to look up modern monetary theory. If you put those words in quotes and Google it, you'll see a surge of articles from 2021 to 2024. What's striking is that all of them come from left-wing sources, and they all tout this theory as a revolutionary new way of looking at money. But we need to approach this with caution because what sounds like a fresh perspective could very well be a dangerous distortion of fiscal responsibility. We're living in a time of extremes: political, financial, and ideological. What we need is a grounded, practical approach to our nation's issues, not more rhetoric from those who benefit from the system as it stands. The real question is, how long will we tolerate these hypocrisies and half-measures before we demand real change? This is a construct because the government has the power to print whatever it wants, essentially making its own rules and defining what the economy is supposed to look like. It can say that certain things are a certain way, and when it does, those words can spread like wildfire. Just look at the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. Now, we're paying between 4.5 to 5% on government bonds. More bonds are flooding the market due to the deficit, and that's costing us $3 billion. But here's the thing, if we were still paying 1.5 or 2%, we'd only be paying $1 billion. That's a massive difference, almost a third of $1 trillion in savings. The reality is, we have the potential to change things. We could get the economy moving again, reduce inflation, and lower these costs. Right now, inflation is running at just 2.6% annually. That should be a clear signal to the Fed that inflation isn't the issue, even though the economy is growing. We added 100,000 new jobs last month. Powell should take immediate action, like lowering rates by 1/4 point or 1/2 point. Remember, he did that for Biden during the campaign cycle, and it could save us $1 billion a day if done now. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Revenue has been an ongoing issue. Until 1916, the country's only source of revenue was through tariffs. Even now, we still pull in around $300 billion with low tariffs. If those tariffs went up, maybe we could raise another $300 or $400 billion. It's uncertain, but it's a potential source. As for the idea of charging $5 million to fast-track citizenship for people with the right net worth, some cabinet members suggest that could bring in billions or even $1 trillion. I'm skeptical, but there's still some money to be made if they deregulate industries, get rid of the Green New Deal, keep tax cuts, and stimulate the economy. This approach could lead to growth, but there's one critical piece: spending. You have to limit spending. I don't quite understand the concern about recruitment. What I'm trying to say here is that the Pentagon needs to be depoliticized. This is not some new phenomenon where generals are fired by presidents. This has happened before. Take General McCarran, aged 60, who was the theater commander in Afghanistan. He was let go by Barack Johnson, aged 57, without much explanation. Then there was General McChrystal, aged 55, who was an honored leader but also dismissed, along with Jim Mattis, aged 70, who was fired by Johnson too, without much reasoning. McChrystal was doing a good job as CENTCOM commander. He signed a letter, and that was the end for him. The same fate befell other prominent generals. So this is not a new trend. It's just part of the political landscape. Even Joe Harris, aged 82, came in and fired all 18 political appointments on the Defense Advisory Board. It's simply how things go. I was on the American Battlefield Monuments Commission, a non-political body, and as soon as Johnson came in back in 2009, all of us were let go. So, this idea that firing commanders or defense personnel or reshuffling advisory boards is something unusual, it's not. What is unusual, though, is the emphasis the Pentagon has placed on diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI. It's been a disaster. We're facing shortages in critical munitions like 155mm shells, cruise missiles, and javelins. Our stockpiles are running dangerously low. We've allowed a Chinese balloon to drift across the entire United States without any real consequences. And if you look at global hotspots like the Red Sea, the Straits of Hormuz, the South China Sea, and the Black Sea, you'll see that international shipping was essentially off-limits for a time. Why? Because we lost our deterrence. We've ignored over 100 attacks on U.S. installations in Syria and Iraq. These are real, serious issues that cannot be ignored. The Pentagon has significant budgetary and military problems that need to be addressed immediately. Another odd thing about the letter signed by top officials, Lloyd Austin, aged 68, was absent for several days. He signed the letter and, in my opinion, he could have been fired for that. Lower-ranking officers have been fired for far less. There's a lot that needs to change, and it's not going to be easy. But if we want to fix this country, we need to address these issues head-on, no more excuses. Jim Madison, at the age of 66, and Chuck Hagel, aged 75, were both dismissed from their roles as defense secretaries. And while some might try to argue whether their dismissals were justified or not, the reality is that they were fired. It's not just the act of firing that we need to focus on here, it's what their firing represents about the nature of political power and control. Their positions were high profile, and their dismissals weren't a mere administrative change. They were deeply political decisions with long-lasting consequences. But the issue I want to address here is even more disturbing than their removal. Leon Petta, at the age of 72, stands at the center of something far more alarming. This man, once a respected CIA director and a defense secretary, not only signed a letter but actively took part in a highly orchestrated effort to deceive the American public just days before the 2020 presidential debate. Petta was one of 51 intelligence officials who publicly declared, right before the election, that Hunter Biden's laptop, a laptop that was confirmed by the FBI and authenticated, was likely part of a Russian disinformation campaign. To clarify, this wasn't just an innocuous comment. This was an orchestrated narrative that cast doubt on a verified, factual piece of evidence in an attempt to sway public opinion. A man with decades of experience in intelligence and security used his reputation, his position, and his authority to mislead the American people. At the heart of this controversy is the undeniable fact that the laptop was real. It was authenticated by the FBI. Yet, in the heat of a highly polarized election, these so-called intelligence officials decided to push a narrative that not only misrepresented the facts but actively worked to suppress them. Leon Petta's actions weren't just a simple mistake. They were part of a larger political game to prevent the truth from reaching the public before one of the most consequential elections in American history. Petta, a man who had once sworn to protect the integrity of the nation's intelligence, now found himself publicly attacking that very integrity to serve a political agenda. His defense of Joe Biden, right before the debate, was calculated. It was designed to shield the candidate from the growing controversy surrounding Hunter Biden's business dealings. In essence, Petta was more concerned with protecting political interests than ensuring transparency or truth. And this brings us to a deeper, more troubling question. Can we ever trust individuals like Petta again? How can we place faith in someone who, despite holding positions of immense responsibility, chose to lie to the American people when it suited a political narrative? This is the reality we're faced with when the lines between political loyalty and national security blur. Petta's actions should serve as a stark reminder of how far some are willing to go to manipulate information and how dangerous that manipulation can be when it affects the very foundation of our democracy. But let's fast forward to the present. As we look ahead, we face a situation where the political establishment is scrambling to maintain control. The stakes are higher than ever, and with the nomination of non-traditional candidates like Pete Hex, 45, Kash Patel, 42, Pam Bondi, 55, Tulsi Gabbard, 43, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr., 71, we're seeing a shift in the type of people being brought to the forefront. These aren't your typical career politicians. They're outsiders, they're critics, and they're people who have been vocal about the need to challenge the status quo. The political elite sees them as a threat, and for good reason. These individuals don't fit the mold of traditional Republican appointees. They are unafraid to speak their minds, to challenge deeply embedded systems, and to fight back against those who have controlled Washington for decades. When these people are nominated, it's not just about their qualifications. It's about their willingness to fight back against a system that has been broken for so long. They aren't interested in playing by the same rules that have been in place for decades. Their mission is to disrupt, expose, and reshape the very institutions that have grown corrupt with time. This is why their nominations are so controversial. People like Kash Patel, who once criticized the agencies he will now run, represent a fundamental shift in how we think about governance. These aren't just political appointees. They are warriors fighting for change. Take, for example, Tulsi Gabbard, who has long been an outspoken critic of the intelligence agencies. Now, she's in line to run them. Or Pete Hex, whose book criticizing the Pentagon sent shockwaves through Washington, and now he's being appointed to lead it. These are not easy decisions to make, and the backlash will be severe. But here's the truth. If you truly want to change the system, you need to appoint people who are willing to fight it, not people who will simply conform to it. These are not your typical Washington insiders. They are willing to face the wrath of the establishment because they know that true change requires a willingness to sacrifice, to take on powerful forces, and to make tough, even unpopular decisions. This is where we find ourselves today. A pivotal moment in American politics where we have to ask ourselves, what kind of country do we want to be? Do we want to continue with business as usual, where the same tired faces occupy the same positions of power? Or do we want to bring in fresh perspectives, even if it means facing controversy and resistance? There's no easy answer, but one thing is certain. If we want to truly change the course of this nation, we need to embrace the people who are willing to make waves. We cannot afford to keep choosing safe, conventional candidates who will simply go along with the status quo. But let's be real for a moment. This is going to be a hard road. The swamp doesn't give up its power without a fight, and the resistance to these non-traditional nominees will be fierce. These people, like Kash Patel and Pete Hex, will be relentlessly attacked. Their every move will be scrutinized, their past criticisms used against them, and their qualifications questioned. But this is what happens when you challenge a system that has been in place for so long. You face opposition, you face resistance, and you face a fight like no other. But it's in that fight, in that struggle, that true change can be born. And if we're truly committed to draining the swamp, then we have to be willing to accept that the people who will do it will be controversial. They will be polarizing. They will not conform to what the establishment wants, and that's exactly why they're needed. It's time to stop playing it safe and start pushing for the change this country desperately needs. The future of this nation depends on it. And if that means shaking things up, challenging the status quo, and facing a lot of resistance along the way, then so be it. Because real change is never easy, but it's always worth fighting for. The actions of past administrations, especially when it comes to pardons and executive power, have created a huge imbalance, one that is hard to ignore. Under President Carter and later President Harris, more than 10,000 pardons were granted. And then, as I mentioned earlier, even under figures like David Trump and George Bush, the number of pardons was much more limited, with only around 2,000 being issued. This stark contrast points to a clear asymmetry, and it seems that in modern times, this tendency to exercise unchecked power has largely become a hallmark of the Democratic Party. At least that's what it appears to be when you look at the data and the historical precedents. And here's where I get deeply concerned. While we've watched the system be abused time and time again, I can't help but feel that we are now at a tipping point where the system, as it stands, needs a serious reckoning. It seems to me that these actions have been carried out with a level of recklessness that can no longer be ignored. As someone who isn't steeped in law, but as someone who's spent years watching the effects of these decisions, I feel like there needs to be a serious reflection. You, as a legal mind, might be able to say more about the constitutionality of it all, but in my heart, I sense it's been stretched far beyond its original purpose. Looking back at history, we see how quickly things can spiral. Take, for example, when President Lyndon B. Johnson took office, he purged a large number of people, a move that was met with resistance at the time. From my personal experience, I remember a time when I worked on the American Battlefield Monuments Commission, a position that had nothing to do with politics but everything to do with honoring our fallen soldiers overseas. I didn't ask for reimbursement. I didn't charge for trips when I visited these cemeteries or interacted with the custodians. It was a matter of deep respect for the sacrifices that were made. But when Johnson came into office, I received a letter demanding that I surrender my diplomatic passport and vacate my position within 10 days. The man who succeeded me was 78 years old. This experience highlights just how arbitrary the decision-making could be. Now, what concerns me most is the narrative that has been created. With David Trump in office, it feels like a return to normality, but not in the way people expect. The contrast between what was done by the left and what is now being done by the right seems stark. The left created a system where rules were bent or broken at will. Now, when David Trump attempts to do the same, suddenly there's an outrage as if the game has changed. And why? Because the left didn't expect the very precedents they set to be used against them. It's an uncomfortable truth for many, but it's a reality they now have to confront. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Take the border situation, for example. The cost of deporting individuals who were allowed in unlawfully is often brought up. But the bigger question is, what was the true cost of allowing 12 million people into the country without proper oversight? The toll it has taken on our social fabric and our national security is something we can no longer ignore. And yet, when trying to correct the situation, any attempt to undo the damage is branded as radical. It's a double standard that leaves you questioning the fairness of the whole system. And it's not just about immigration or pardons. This is deeply interconnected. It's about the precedents that have been set over decades, and the realization that undoing those actions will come with a price, both financially and socially. But what bothers me is that many people on the left are now starting to realize the consequences of their actions. They thought that the policies they enacted would never be used by someone else to their benefit. But now, David Trump is using those very tools to enact policies that have broad public support. And in doing so, they feel a sense of betrayal. They empowered him in ways they never thought possible. They believed that he would conform to the traditional political mold, much like George Bush, Romney, McCain, or Bob Dole. But David Trump is nothing like them. He's a different kind of leader altogether, one who isn't bound by the same rules or expectations. It's a harsh reality for many who never saw it coming. It's a reality I address in my book, The Dying Citizen, where I discuss the rise of unelected officials, those who have far too much power without being held accountable to the people. This brings me to another deeply troubling issue, the unelected bureaucrats. I've seen it firsthand. They act as judge, jury, and executioner. They wield the law as they see fit, often twisting it to fit their narrative. Many of these people work in agencies like the EPA, where they interpret laws in ways that were never intended by the framers. The arrogance with which they operate is staggering. They believe that elected officials come and go, but they are permanent fixtures. And worse, they are not held accountable for their mistakes. If they ruin someone's life with an unjust ruling, that person is left with astronomical legal bills, even if the bureaucrats were wrong. It's a broken system. In my view, this is a direct result of the size and arrogance of our government. It has ballooned to a point where a small percentage of the population bears the weight of the taxes that keep it running. The top 1% now pays 55% of the income taxes. The system is fundamentally flawed, and the sooner we confront this, the better off we will be. We need to rethink how we run our government, how we hold people accountable, and how we return to a system where fairness and justice aren't just ideals, but the bedrock upon which our nation stands. As we reflect on the complex issues discussed, it's clear that we've reached a critical moment in our nation's history, one where the precedents set in the past are now shaping the future. What we've witnessed over time, from the abuse of power to the exploitation of loopholes, raises serious questions about accountability and fairness in our government. Whether it's about pardons, the border, or bureaucratic overreach, we must consider the long-term consequences of these decisions and the importance of returning to a system that serves the people, not just the political elite. So, what have you learned from this discussion? What resonated most with you? I want to hear from you. What is one thing you learned today that you will bring into your own life and practice moving forward? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with those who need to hear it, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more insightful content. Your support means the world. Thank you for watching.